Hello everyone and welcome back to the 10th chapter of Tao Te Ching Explained. Today, as always, we're going to be reading through three different translations. First of all, Legge, second of all, Suzuki, and finally Goddard. The three titles of the chapters by these translators are, first of all, Possibilities Through the Tao. Secondly, What Can Be Done. And third, What Is Possible. As always, I'll read you the translations and then talk about what it makes me think about, my little interpretation of it. So without further ado, the first translation goes like this. When the intelligent and animal souls are held together in one embrace, they can be kept from separating. When one gives undivided attention to the vital breath and brings it to the utmost degree of pliancy, he can become as a tender babe. When he has cleansed away the most mysterious sights of his imagination, he can become without a flaw. In loving the people and ruling the state, cannot he proceed without any purpose of action? In the opening and shutting of his gates of heaven, cannot he do so as a female bird? While his intelligence reaches in every direction, cannot he appear to be without knowledge? The Tao produces all things and nourishes them. It produces them and does not claim them as its own. It does all and yet does not boast of it. It presides over all, and yet does not control them. This is what is called the mysterious quality of the Tao. Our second translation goes like this. Who by unending discipline of the senses embraces unity cannot be disintegrated. By concentrating his vitality and inducing tenderness, he can become like a little child. By purifying, by cleansing, and profound intuition, he can be free from faults. Who loves the people when administering the country will practice non-assertion. Opening and closing the gates of heaven, he will be like a mother bird, bright and white, and penetrating the four quarters. He will be unsophisticated. He quickens them and feeds them. He quickens but owns not. He acts but claims not. He excels but rules not. This is called profound virtue. And our final translation goes like this. By patience, the animal spirits can be disciplined. By self-control, one can unify the character. By close attention to the will, compelling gentleness, one can become like a little child. By purifying the subconscious desires, one may be without fault. In ruling his country, if the wise magistrate loves his people, he can avoid compulsion. In measuring out rewards, the wise magistrate will act like a mother bird. While sharply penetrating into every corner, he may appear to be unsuspecting. While quickening and feeding his people, he will be producing but without pride of ownership. He will benefit, but without claim of reward. He will persuade, but not compel by force. This is the profoundest virtue. Well, it appears that in the opening lines, we're being told that we can, by some effort or thought, bring body and mind into accord. In one light, we could believe there to be an animal and a spiritual aspect to ourselves, a split between the body and the mind. The animal desire down here in the carnal realm, and the true self somewhere up there in the spiritual realm. These two forces are ever opposing each other. This is the basis of light versus dark. The good wolf versus the bad wolf. feed one and starve the other. For if you allow one to grow too big, it will bring about your downfall, and everyone will hate you just like you thought they did in the first place. So how is one to do this consciously, with effort and with willpower? Are we meant to begin fasting, abstaining from all earthly pleasures? Some would say yes, while some would ask, who is this self that will be abstaining? Or rather, is this all tied back to the usual explanation of modesty? Modesty as the way of the Tao. Lao Tzu loved talking about modesty. It is a clumsy and verbal way of explaining how the universe operates, but does it hold any merit? It's just a word. It's not attached to any visual or physical stimulus. It's nothing else other than a sound. Modesty. A sound that means to keep with the measure, to stay on the down low, to keep everything to a minimum, and to not fill up your own cup past the brim. Now there's some food for thought. So we're being told in this chapter that we can become as a child. Now this can host a range of interpretations. Perhaps we understand this as not getting things your way, not getting everything that you want all the time, crying up a storm and manipulating your surroundings to get what you desire. Conversely, it can also mean to rediscover a long-lost faculty of wonder that appears in our day and age only a small child possesses. As adults in the so-called real world, these types of feelings and ideas have been beaten out of us. Can you remember what it was like to be stuck in a stupor while simply watching a ladybug climb on a leaf? To play a game in the woods with your friends for hours and hours, digging holes in the ground with spoons, climbing in the trees pretending to be goblins or whatever. It's like all of those times that you stayed up later than usual, just watching a bonfire without saying a word. Or the times you found yourself watching a river, or sitting on the beach watching the waves in the ocean. You get lost in this strange, otherworldly place, and time ceases to exist. All of your priorities and ambitions in the world of things are put on mute temporarily. Well, my interpretation usually leads towards syncretism, and they're inherently one-sided, just as anyone else's would be. But we can see that all these different authors and translators that have worked with the Tao, they tend to argue and see things differently than each other, whether it's in a superficial or in a meaningful way. We can talk about things like pneuma, prana, chi, life force, energy, souls and spirits, ghosts and ghouls, exorcisms, magic, spells, shape-shifting, whatever. But all of these things tend to be based on metaphor and abstraction, at least in my view. All of these terms and ideas are the ultimate separation between the individual and everything else. So I ask, does there need to be a separation? Does one, even in so-called spiritual pursuits, always need to turn everything into a game of power and, for a lack of a better analogy, a dick measuring contest? Moving on a bit, the part about the female or mother bird, this seems to be pointing to the idea that we may stick our noses into the affairs of others. However, we must be stealthy. We must guide without pushing too hard. If we have children or students under our wing, we must act with softness and swiftness, never leaving a trace of our intentions behind. We are to act as an invisible hand or as a guardian angel. We hope that we inspire our children and our friends with the ideals of modesty, non-ownership, and pride, but nobody wants that friend that continuously bothers them day in and day out about spiritual matters. It tends to bother people when you bring it up. So it appears that it's just best not to do that. So before we end this talk, I would like to go into the idea of non-ownership a little bit further. And as a forewarning, I have no intention of leading you to believe that you can think yourself into becoming rich, or that you can, by some magical or spiritual faculty, lasso the universe to your will. In my view, true study has absolutely nothing to do with monetary gain, social standing, or any other enterprise of the human ego. All of that baggage is supposed to be left behind as we continue our journey inside into the realms of where words, self, and concepts go out the window, and the self comes into view. So my point is that you might seem to notice that the more you give away, the more you return. I won't go all the way and say that nature abhors a vacuum, because I'm not really smart enough to go that far with my intellect. Nor do I agree with those concepts when they're placed into a spiritual context, if you want to call it that. Within this space, and without beating around the bush, we're talking about being able to quite literally attract wealth or attract influence into your life without any effort other than mental effort, without an invention, an idea, or the hard work that comes along with our normal concept of wealth and affluence. But some believe that it's possible to intend for there to be a random check in the mailbox signed over into your name for a couple $1,000s for some strange circumstance to gain you a free car or something like that. This idea has been being passed around for years now, that if you can just smell it, taste it, touch it, and think about it all the time, leave notes around your house, it's going to happen. You're going to get that car, that thing is going to happen, and you're going to be over the moon, and everything's going to be better. My point is that these are silly ideas. It would be, in a sense, it would be disrespectful to everyone who came before us, working and toiling harder than we could imagine, getting further away from all of the religious and social institutions that have held us back for so long, just for us in the year 2019 to still be holding crystals and praying for money, praying for cars, praying for soulmates, not taking responsibility for anything in our lives. Essentially, reverting to primitive thinking. We have to remember that we must work to live, and even though it can seem boring or below us or uninteresting, we have to find a way to spend our time in this life while doing something productive and hopefully something fulfilling to us. In the context of society, we must keep the tiny little thought in the back of our minds that we are one by one, moment by moment, laying down the foundations for future generations, our children and our children's children. Keep that in mind, and it will keep you going. With all of that said, I hope that everyone had a fantastic holiday season, and I wish you the best for the new year. Until next time.